Lost is over, but we have to go back down the hatch here on RHAP. We know scripted TV, it's Lost for first time watchers. I'm Josh Wigler. I'm joined here by Mike Bloom, and we're actually beginning this podcast with the end of the podcast. We're recording this out of sequence, and we're just taking bits from the future of the podcast and re-editing them into the front portion.
Right, Josh is coming to you from a coffin. I have unnaturally straight hair. We're
Uh-huh.
all in such different places. You have to figure out how we got here. Josh, so excited to talk about season 4. A very odd season of Lost in multiple ways, but one that is near and dear to my heart. And suffice it to say, after going back and watching this and talking about Lost for the umpteenth time, it is definitive. Lost is our constant.
Yes, Lost is our constant
If all else
for sure.
fails.
If all else fails, podcast about Lost, Mike, is that what it comes down to?
I mean, I think given the state of our world ever since we've started the podcast, that's become emphatically true.
Yeah,
I would
not
say.
a bad shout. Not a bad shout. Of course, if you are not yet subscribed to Down the Hatch, we implore you to do so. Hit subscribe, Down the Hatch, RHAP, wherever you get your podcasts. If you want a short link, go to robhasawebsite.com/down the hatch. That's robhasawebsite.com/down the hatch. Hit subscribe. Leave us stars. Give us 5 stars, not 4, even though you'll be tempted because it's one of the numbers. 5 stars would be great. Of course, if you want to send in feedback as well, you can write to us down the hatch, rhap@gmail.com. We are finishing up our Lost coverage over the course of the next few weeks, and then Mike and I will be resuming Battlestar Galactica in October, and we're going to give you plenty of time to catch up on that. Watch the first 2 seasons and the miniseries of Battlestar Galactica, or else be spoiled on all things BSG Season 3. But today, you shall only be spoiled through the Season 4 finale of Lost. These Lost podcasts are designed for people who are watching Lost for the first time. Here we are talking about Season 4, the flash forward season for those folks for the very first time. And as Mike says, groundbreaking season of TV.
Yes. So let's set ourselves up, Josh. Let's send ourselves back to the what seems to be an eon ago, the fall of 2007. Of course, Lost season 4 was in production, and they ended up filming
First season that they're making where they know there's an ending in sight. So now they can start building towards an ending. Allegedly. They're in position to start plotting towards a finale.
But momentum is building for the first 8 episodes of season 4. We are introduced to a brand new bevy of mysterious cast members. We have this new location in the freighter. We have penned, if you will, one of the best episodes of the series, if not modern television, in the form of a constant. Everything is coming up Lost until the writer's strike.
Yes, and it is not last year's writer's strike, despite
everything old is new again.
Some of the time-displaced shenanigans surrounding Desmond. This was the 2007-2008 writer's strike, which was considerably shorter than the strikes that occurred from the Screen Actors Guild and the WGA in the summer of 2023 and into a bit of the fall of 2023 as well. This was same rules though, right? Pens down, pencils down. These were conversations that were being had and negotiations being had over DVD profits and, home media, and not a ton of protections ultimately, I think, for the streaming era that they would soon launch into, which is a big part of why we got into strike season again not terribly long ago. How this impacted TV is, as you can imagine, myriad ways. How it impacted Lost specifically was Lost had to stop production after the scripts were complete through, I believe it is it Meet Kevin Johnson?
Yeah, I believe that from what we remember, Meet Kevin Johnson was like the last thing they had formally
Yes.
filmed before the strikes.
And so they're not able to write any further. Strikes get resolved. Lost season 4 had a 16 episode order, but at this point, we're not going to hit all 16 episodes. And we have a lot narratively up in the air that needs to get resolved. As you can imagine, where we were at Meet Kevin Johnson, and one of the drawbacks potentially of the flash forward format is we now have set destinations to drive toward. And in this moment of Lost Season 4, none of that was clear. How the hell are we going to get the Oceanic Six off the island, for instance? And so Lost, when the strikes are resolved, will come back with one of my favorite episodes of the whole show, and then a couple of episodes, at least one of which is kind of like, okay, we really don't have much time, guys. And then a 3-part finale, which during multiple moments of the 3-part finale is like, guys, how are you going to do this? How are you going to resolve this? How are you going to get there? And ultimately, I think that they resolved the points that they had to drive towards quite well. A lot of surprises along the way, an incredibly fun setup for season 5, an incredibly dark setup for season 5 as it pertains to some of these characters, but a really compelling season of TV that I think in some ways is probably better because it had to be re-examined and reevaluated, and things had to happen on a tighter timeline. My biggest critique of season 4, Mike, is I think that there are a bunch of filler episodes in here. I think that some of my least favorite episodes of Lost are in season 4, while some of my very favorite episodes of the show are in here as well. This is one of the more imbalanced seasons for me personally, but what it gets right, very exciting, very, very electric, and I think that it barrels towards an incredible finale.
Well, I think especially from a rewatch perspective, which obviously we're not talking about, but now that you've all watched season 4, obviously the big to do in these first like 5-6 episodes is we get this teased out in the very first episode, the Oceanic Six, that there were only 6 people from the island who escaped. Now we'll find out later on that there were definitely more than 6, but we are slowly but surely figuring out, or Hurley figuring out, who is the Oceanic Six and what they're doing right now. And so when you look at episodes like The Economist, like Eggtown, like Yeon, it does sort of stop down with the on-island activity in favor of the writing servicing, okay, these are these people who got off the island and we're trying to figure out what they're doing now and how their lives have changed. So I do think that, especially if you're watching from that lens, the on-island stuff is not serviced as much. To your point, it kind of does an about face once we get to the shape of things to come. We kill off sort of the more dangling plot threads, much like Carl and Danielle Rousseau. And we should also talk about one of the odder elements of season 4, which is, yes, there's a lot of new introduced, but there is some old introduced in the form of the return of Harold Perrineau as Michael.
Yes, he's back briefly. Walt's back sort of in like drips and drabs. So that storyline resumes. A lot to get to, Mike, for a season that is relatively short. You talk about how the Oceanic Six are developed throughout season 4, and we waste no time as we go to the season 4 premiere, the beginning of the end.
AKA Lost Civil War.
Lost Civil War. Yeah. Whose side are you on? Is Jack Captain America? Or I think probably, right?
Because I would imagine that the freighter is the Sokovia Accords. And so Jack would be sort of in favor of following the letter to the law, while Locke is definitely the Iron Man.
Okay, no. So Iron Man was the one who's like, yo, Team Sokovia Accords.
Like,
we got to
totally
do it.
Right.
So I think Jack is Iron Man and Locke is Captain America.
Which is interesting.
It just makes you wonder who's his Bucky.
Yeah, because I do think Ben is going to end up, I think, being his Bucky by the end, interestingly enough.
Yes.
Which makes sense. Like, Ben could be the Winter Soldier turned Bucky by the end of it.
Ben
with a
bit
of the
feels
hero
like
turn
Baron Zemo, he's got and I think Sawyer sort of has the Bucky hair. And I feel like Bucky makes sacrifice plays and Sawyer jumps off the chopper. We could spend a lot of time here if we really wanted to.
So is Sawyer going to come back in season 5 with a metallic arm from
We'll
the
see.
others.
Yeah, maybe that could be. Keep an
Is
eye
that what
out
they're
for the
doing in room 23? Was
keep
Carl brainwashed with a series
keep
of
an
code
eye out
words?
for Sawyer's metallic arm in season 5 of Lost. So the beginning of the end, it breaks tradition from Lost up to this point. Seasons 2 and 3 are Jack centric episodes. The first season premiere is an everybody centric. This is a Hurley centric episode, and very quickly, Mike. We are once again playing with audience expectations. There's a big pile of coconuts. You think you're on the island, and then Hugo Hurley Reyes drives through this image of coconuts and is alive and maybe not so well in a time that takes place after the island. Hurley has gotten off, and he says he is one of the Oceanic Six. And
Yeah.
so the flash forward storyline really kicks off into gear. We pick up the ball from we have to go back right away.
Yeah, and so Hurley is going to showcase that while his body is certainly off the island, his brain might not be, considering that he has checked himself back into Santa Rosa, because since he has left the island, he's starting to see some familiar faces.
Yes.
Josh, even before we see Michael this season. And certainly this episode is going to be sort of the epilogue to the legacy of Charlie Pace, who goes off in such a glorious fashion, as we mentioned in Through the Looking Glass. And that also includes an appearance from Dominic Monaghan, as it looks like Hurley can now see ghosts.
Yeah. So we're also sort of moving into like maybe like the superpower era of Lost is what this feels like,
Again,
right?
Civil
Where
War feels incredibly appropriate.
it really is starting to feel that way, where like, in season 3 we're starting to maybe dip into that territory with Desmond, like has this unique relationship with time. He could see Charlie's death. That's a pretty crappy superpower. Though here in this season as well, we will see that like Desmond's relationship with time continues to be a bit abnormal. Here Hurley, sometime post island, has developed the ability, or he's losing his mind, I guess you get to choose, to speak with certain people, whether it's Charlie or, like you say, like Anna Lucia.
Mhm.
So this is a very interesting development. We'll be tracking it across the season. By the end of it, like we said, you don't see Adewale Akinoye Agabaje on Lost anymore, but like maybe the ghost of Mr. Echo is somebody
Checkmate, Mr. Echo.
that Hurley plays chess with regularly. So some interesting stuff there. The other thing I want to say about the flash forwards right now, at least, is that they are told out of sequence throughout the season. I think like we could try to string it all together chronologically, Mike, maybe once we get to the end of the season. But it's going to be like very nonlinear
Mhm.
as the season unfolds. You have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out like, okay, this one goes here, that one goes there, right? Like you're just like really weaving the tapestry.
Yes. So, obviously, there's a lot happening with Hurley right now. And yeah, we do get a check in with Jack post We Have to Go Back, where we should also mention that he is not the only visitor to Hurley. And we are going to be introduced to a very mysterious character, Josh, of course, played by the late, great Lance Reddick, Matthew Abaddon, who is claiming in the moment to Hurley that he is a representative of Oceanic Airlines there to settle a suit that happened as a result of the plane crash. But Hurley is very perturbed, to say the least, by his presence.
No, he does not seem to be. He seems to be, as I like to say, on the side of the anaconda snakes, Mike. There is this really scary moment where he's like, "Are they still alive?" And Hurley goes, "What?" And he goes, "You heard me." And Lance Reddick performing like only Lance Reddick could. I am
Mhm.
still heartbroken at the tragic loss of Lance Reddick, March 2023, when we lost that
Yeah.
actor. I think there were designs on him being more involved in this season of Lost as well, but he ultimately gets cast in Fringe. So he's off doing Fringe things. So you don't get quite as much of him here as you want to. But what he does represent throughout this season, I think, is chilling and very exciting as we're going to be weaving part of Desmond's backstory into the fabric of the on island material. So much of
Mhm.
this episode is about like, okay, we've summoned the freighter, they're on their way, but Locke is missing, and now the body of Naomi is missing, but actually she's not dead yet. And we get into this big sort of battle between Jack and Locke for what should we be doing here?
Yeah, basically what happens is Desmond will eventually make his way back from the Looking Glass station, where he then relays Charlie's final message, which is obviously etched in our memories on his hand, not Penny's boat, a confirmation of, okay, wait a minute, they may not be the capital G good guys that we think they are. And so it is going to lead to this schism that is going to determine basically the course of the entirety of season 4, where much like Mr. Friendly did back when he was still alive, we're drawing a line. That's our line, Josh, where Locke is team, don't trust him. We're going to, stay on the island here and try to take down the freighter people. They're going to try to take us all out. Jack is on team, nope, these are the ones that are going to be our saviors. We have to trust them. And so it is going to lead to a division of many different types of people. Interestingly, especially given what we see in the flash forwards, Hurley initially is on Team Locke. He says to Jack, right, like, if Charlie's final message was not to trust these people, then I'm going to
listen to my friend.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting sort of mini arc for Hurley on the island. He has this big moment of catharsis where he cannonballs into the ocean, just sort of like in celebration of taking out the others. You've talked about this, Josh, and certainly I think in retrospective season 4 as a great representation of like the last sort of unfettered moment of joy.
Certainly. I mean, who knows what's coming on the other side of season 4 other than everybody who has watched the show. But what I will say is, like, you've seen the rest of season 4, and like the numbers of people are drastically dwindling, and many of these people end up escaping. So at least for like this iteration, like this era of Lost, this is sort of the end of innocence, I do think, is Hurley cannonballing into the ocean. It's a great moment.
Yeah, so we're going to see a bunch of people go off with Locke, among them Claire, Rousseau, and her group in the form of Carl and Alex. Ben is going to, like, who's still a prisoner at this point, is like, Jack, may I have permission to go over to Locke's side? And Sawyer is actually going to go over there as well. I mean, he'll talk later about how he feels like he doesn't really have a reason to leave. And so we're going to have this group get divided in half just in time for some new blood to get welcomed in, as Jack and Kate are going to get greeted by a brand new face who takes off his little parachute helmet and asks with the most uniquely squeaky voice ever, "Are you Jack?
Are you Jack? I'm here to rescue you. I'm Daniel Faraday." So I think this brings us nicely into the next episode, Confirmed Dead, Mike. That is what Naomi is, certainly. She is confirmed dead. But so are the survivors of Oceanic 815, according to the flashbacks that we get. And so this is, again, of course, we're getting into some flashbacks as well this season. There's still non-tattoo stories to tell in the past, Mike. And in this episode, we're getting to meet 4 of the new characters who will really define the action of the season.
Yeah, so let's sort of stop down, Josh, and talk about the 4 people that are centric characters of this freighter team. Naomi does get a flashback scene as well, where it's like they're getting the A-team together. Matthew Abaddon is kind of profiling them all. But obviously, these 4 people that are big new characters for the season, with maybe one other exception who's currently on the freighter, are going to be the new faces we'll be talking about over the course of this. So let's chat about them. And let's start with the first person we were introduced to at the end of episode 1. And I believe the first one we get a flashback from here in the form of the enigmatic Daniel Faraday.
I think that's a very nice way of putting it. Daniel Faraday, who is this incredible science boy. If like Jack was man of science, like I don't want to call him like little boy of science, but he's like wizard of science, right? I think he's sort of the whiz kid, Daniel Faraday, played by the great Jeremy Davies, who has some pieces of himself seemingly missing. There are aspects of Faraday that don't seem to be, the light doesn't scatter quite right when it comes to Daniel Faraday.
His only flashback scene is watching footage of and news of the crash of Oceanic 815, supposedly, and him crying and his caretaker asking him, what's wrong? And he basically says, I don't know. And obviously, we'll get into this with a much larger, more mysterious aspect in The Constant, where he is not only a master of this concept of time travel, time displacement that Desmond is going through, but also simultaneously connected to it somehow.
Yeah. So the episode really introduces us to these characters who are split across different factions. There's Charlotte,
Hmm.
she's not a forensic anthropologist like Dr. Bones, I believe. She's just an
No,
archaeologist.
yeah, like a regular, like almost an Indiana Jones, if you will. And that, like, when we see her, she's in Tunisia and she finds a Hydra collar in the desert, something that will be answered once we see Ben perhaps wind up in a similar place in his episode, played by Rebecca Mader, who up to this point was probably most well known for her work in The Devil Wears Prada. Will obviously go on to stick on ABC for Once Upon a Time in
Hmm.
a large way. But Charlotte also has a little bit of a mysterious past to her as well that may or may not be connected to the island.
We'll see. Yeah, by the end of the season, Miles is going to be like, "Hey, don't you want to stick around with me?" Speaking of Miles, Ken Lung. We're talking about him every week on the industry recaps here on RHAP. We know scripted TV. Miles Strom is his name.
Yes, so Miles Strom is, and again, we're going to superpowers, Josh. One episode after, okay, can Hurley see dead people? We're immediately introduced to a guy who claims that he can, at least. This is a guy who is listening to a radio report about Flight 815 as he's basically like getting called in to do a reading about a spirit being in the room of somebody. We'll obviously find out that I think Miles is probably one of the more nefarious members of this group, considering that he is going to try to get an exorbitant sum for Benjamin Linus this episode and next episode as well. So I would say definitely not necessarily going to the island specifically to research it or have some sort of connection back to it.
Yeah, so he's looking for something. Frank Lapidus is yet another one of these freighters, played by the great Jeff Fahey, who is he was supposed to be he could have been eaten by a monster way back in season 1.
Yeah,
Seth Norris, the Greg Grunberg character, that was his buddy, and Frank Lapidus was supposed to be flying 815.
yeah. And so what's interesting is he ends up seeing, again, footage from an underwater camera of the crash of 815, including some of the bodies that were left over. And they close in on what is supposedly Seth Norris's body. And Frank Lapidus, the tinfoil hat begins to develop on the crook of his head as he realizes, like, wait a minute. Seth Norris never took his wedding band off. That clearly doesn't have one. This
That
whole
ain't
thing is
him.
yeah, this whole thing is a sham. Jeff Fahey brings so much great dry energy to this season that clearly this is like the Argyle, right? This was the driver that was brought in and is now just kind of along for the ride, ironically speaking, for all the malarkey that happens on the island. I mean, Jeff Fahey, of course, no stranger to sci-fi, being the star of the Lawnmower Man
Sure.
adaptation, but very, very fun character who obviously is going to play one of the most important roles to getting the Oceanic Six off the island.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Jeff Fahey's Lapidus probably exists specifically because the show's like, we're gonna need a pilot. We're gonna
Yeah.
need a pilot here if we're gonna get characters off the island. Forgetting that in the very first episode of Lost, Matthew Fox is like, I can fly planes. I don't really like it, but I know how to do it. And it's like, okay, well, maybe Jack could have flown the plane, but I'm glad they forgot that because we get Frank Lapidus. So this episode is really about introducing these characters and the various different sectors of people who get rounded up together, and the fact that these people are not necessarily here to rescue Jack and the gang. In fact, they are specifically here for somebody else, Benjamin Linus, as is going to become apparent when they ask Juliet, when they find out that she
Mm-hmm.
wasn't on the plane. And it's a big moment. They say, where is he? And who is he but Ben Linus? And Ben Linus, separately, who is getting his ass handed to him as a captive of Locke,
Yep.
is going to tell Locke, like, these people are dangerous. They're coming. And by the way, I have a man on their boat. And so begins the who is the guy on your boat mystery. That's one of my least favorite mysteries of the show, even though I love who the guy on the boat ultimately is. The Economist, Mike. We
Mm-hmm.
continue the adventures of revealing who are the members of the Oceanic Six? And I think that if you had like on your bingo card of like who is capable of getting off of the island, really high on that list would be Saeed Jarrah. So it is confirmed in The Economist that not only does Saeed get off the island, but he gets back to some of his old tricks once he does. He
Yeah.
straightens his hair. He
But
would,
his actions are far from straight morally, as
yeah.
for someone who came to the island in a very complicated place about all the blood that he shed as part of the Republican Guard. He has now become, to ape a term from another Damon Lindelof show following this, an international assassin. And so we see over the course of this that he is, meant to take out this woman named Elsa, and then there's this entire back and forth about oh, is he falling for his mark, etc., etc. And then the big twist we get towards the end of this is that yes, there is an Oceanic Six that we're still trying to find out more about, but there might be some parentheticals there, Josh, as Saeed, who had gotten shocked perhaps by the twist of Elsa, ends up getting patched up in the vet's office, very shady, crime adjacent. And the person that is patching him up, as the camera pans around to reveal, is none other than Benjamin Linus.
Right.
Ben has also made it off the island.
And so you're left to wonder, like, okay, we know the Oceanic Six exists. Like, are we counting people who weren't on Oceanic, or is like Ben an additional? Because like that was not something I was necessarily expecting. And I think like the bigger deal is what on earth would motivate Saeed to work with this guy? Like Saeed and Ben never got along. They famously, started their relationship on a very, very violent foot. And now Saeed is waging war on behalf of Ben. That gets clearly explored much more as we find out why and how Ben is off the island. But this was a real shock for me in the real time of watching it. On the island, Saeed gets off the island. We are going to see Lapidus is going to take a few people back to the freighter, and that is going to include Saeed and Desmond, who wants to know more about like where's Penny? What's going on with Penny? So the first characters to like leave the island are Saeed and Desmond, and that final shot of him in the helicopter is one of my favorites.
Yeah, and so also we already see that the sides are flip-flopping a bit, Josh. These are more voting blocks than they are alliances.
Than true alliances, yeah.
Yeah, as basically they're going to try to do a bit of a prisoner exchange because Miles had previously been found with Team Jack. Charlotte was with Team Locke. Saeed and Kate are going to accompany Miles to the barracks, which is where Locke's group is going to be holed up for the time being, with, of course, the evacuation of the others, which started back at like the 2/3 mark in season 3. And so after spending some time there, Saeed is going to go back with Charlotte, but Miles is going to stay behind. And surprisingly, Kate is going to stay behind, which also, again, like Hurley, confounds a bit because we know as recent as the last scene of season 3 that she is also going to make it off the island and is also assumingly one of the Oceanic Six.
Yeah. So like how are like we're spreading everybody apart. And so there's like, at least for me, there was a lot of tension of like, you gotta get these people back together. Like, how are we gonna do this? This is a tight wire rope, but that's why they're the writers and they know what they are doing, Mike. Eggtown. Speaking of Kate, Kate has gone to live at the barracks. And it seems like to some degree, maybe it's because she loves Sawyer and just wants to stay and snuggle in bed. But then Sawyer says some mean stuff to Kate, and it seems like maybe these two aren't going to be long for each other after all.
Right. It's this idea of trying to create some sort of semblance of society on the island. Obviously, these two were involved with the others, but in a very different location. But they're kind of picking up from where they left off on Hydra Island here. But it doesn't go terribly well. And to the point where, he tells her, like, oh, what? You're just going to go running back to Jack now? And she angrily rebuffs him in that moment. So safe to say Kate is dealing with a lot of stuff off island, but I think by comparison, it's a little bit of a better situation than what's going on in the barracks.
So, off the island, we are exploring Kate's after island experience, which is, she was a fugitive. You would expect
Hmm.
some follow up on that. And there is. This is the trial of Kate Austen. Jack is a character witness. Jack says, he's asked, "Do you love the defendant?" He says, "Not anymore." And so, like, okay, so he seems like he got over it. But the end of the episode, when he's waiting for her and she tells him, like, "Hey, you know, come on by, the kid would love to see you." And the implication too is that potentially she has had a child with Sawyer. I think is sort of the
Right.
implication that the episode is trying to make you think that, like,
We're finally reintroduced to her mother, who they finally reconcile, or she attempts to, and is like, "I want to see my grandson." And so we think like, "Oh wait, okay, so Kate was preggers," and I'm assuming from the on island stuff that despite the fact that they are on the off again side by the end of this, that we just saw them sleep together. The
right.
child must be Sawyer's.
But it's not. And the child is also not Kate's. The child is Aaron. Aaron is 3. And he is an older boy now. He is far from being turnip head. Aaron is off the island. But where's Claire? Why is Kate raising Aaron? And I think one of the questions that were posed in season 1, one of the most important questions that was posed in season 1, he cannot be raised by another. Does
Hmm.
Kate count? Like, should he not be being raised by Kate? So Aaron being off the island and Kate having that final moment with "Hi, mommy. Hi, Aaron." It's like, oh no.
Right. That was the big twist, is that I think when we assumed the Oceanic Six, we assumed 6 full grown adults and
Right.
not a child who technically was on the plane, but certainly not in the location that we thought. And this also brings to question a bit, especially in retrospect, the validity of Desmond, one of his final prophecies to Charlie, right? About, "I had this vision that Claire was going to get on the helicopter." We obviously will see in the finale that was not the case.
Yeah, unless as you and I speculated, was he just like face blind and thought that Kate was Claire?
To be fair, he did only meet all these people, what, like
Like,
a
very
few weeks
briefly, and he was like
ago?
drunk through most of it, and he was like tripping through time. So I don't
Mhm.
know if he's like, but man, that sucks for Charlie. If it's like, yeah, if you do this, Charlie, woo, Claire gets off the island on this helicopter, and it's like, no, not quite. Ghost Charlie maybe has a word or a bone to pick with Desmond. I don't think Eggtown is a particularly great episode, but I think that the
No.
ending is really strong.
Yeah.
So the end of it is just a great classic Lost twist. Good news. Potentially the best episode of Lost, or maybe even one of the best episodes of TV, recently ranked, I believe it was 37, 38, 39, somewhere
Something
in
by
there,
Steppenwall,
by
yeah.
Alan Sepinwall at Rolling Stone, in his top 100 episodes of TV list. The Constant rated quite high. I think it could have been a little higher, Mike. But when you ask people what's your favorite episode of Lost, The Constant is a constant refrain. Not by absolutely everybody, but by and large. I have never met anyone who loved Lost or even liked Lost and didn't love The Constant.
See, that's the thing, is that, and this is certainly something you and I go back and forth about. And again, not to talk too much about the quality of the episodes that follow season 4, but I think a lot of popular discourse amongst the fandom goes back and forth as to what's the best episode of Lost. Is it Through the Looking Glass, or is it The Constant? I think what you and I have settled upon is that while Through the Looking Glass is the better episode of Lost, The Constant is the better episode of television in what it is able to pull off, especially considering Through the Looking Glass had 2 hours to pull off what it did. The Constant had a much shorter period to do so, especially considering that we are actually jumping between 2 different periods of time
Yeah.
as well. We barely spend any time on the island, as the main action of this episode is going to focus on the increasingly jittery mind of one Desmond David Hume, as him and Saeed and Frank Lapidus are on their way back to the freighter, but as they experience a little bit of turbulence, it is going to somehow jostle Desmond's mind to send him back to 1996. And we experience this maybe a little bit depending on how you view everything that flashes before your eyes from last season, as to, okay, did Desmond really travel back in time, or is he just sort of reliving everything through flashback? Here it seems like we are authentically getting this guy going back and forth between two time periods over the course of an episode.
He has influence, right? Like his actions in the past end up influencing what happens in the present as he's, with Daniel Faraday guiding him through a walkie-talkie, trying to guide Desmond from not dying by time displacement. That his this affects Fisher Stevens, the great Fisher Stevens, who plays Minkowski, whose voice you heard at the end of season 3, but was not Fisher Stevens. So once again, we do a little bit of the Boone Bernard.
Yeah, I would say probably doing a better job as a member of the communications team than Hugo was on Succession.
Maybe. I think maybe fair to say. So he's dying because he's going through this, and like that's the cautionary tale. This is like advanced time displacement, and now Desmond is starting to suffer it as well. And so he needs to go and find Faraday in Oxford. He finds Faraday. He finds out about these premises such as like the constant, who are the constants in your life. These are like your grounding forces. For Desmond, it's very clear who that is. It's Penny, but he does not have access to Penny anymore since they are broken up. So he ends up finding a man by the name of Widmore, Charles Widmore, who we have met previously. This is Penny's father, who says that a single drop of McCutcheon whiskey is worth more than Desmond's entire miserable life.
Speaking of drops, he talks to him while he's pissing during an art gallery auction.
They do not cross swords, but there is some cross talk in the urinal. So it's at this auction where, by the way, Widmore is bidding on something about the Black Rock, and so like, oh, what does Widmore know about the island? And Widmore's like, hold my beer. 1 episode from now, I shall tell you everything. So we're close to the Widmore stuff. I think it's like 1 episode. It's pretty close to 1 episode from now. And he finds out where Penny lives now. He goes and meets Penny and says, I'm gonna need you to call this number, or I'm gonna need your number. Keep your number. Yep. Don't change your number. I'm gonna call you on this date
8 years from now on Christmas Eve.
If you've ever believed me. And so he ends up being able to do exactly that in one of the most emotional back and forths on TV, let alone on Lost.
Yeah, I mean, just to reset the board on these two, these are lovers that have been torn asunder. When we're first really introduced to Penny, it becomes even more developed over the course of Desmond's flashbacks that clearly this is a dynamic that has been torn apart by multiple elements, one of them being her asshole dad, another being, I guess, the time-space continuum, according to Eloise Hawking in Flashes Before Your Eyes. But all Desmond has wanted to do since his boat crashed on the island was to get to Penny. To the point where, again, we were so cruelly robbed of it when she was on that screen and he was in the other room and he was forced out of it because of Mikhail. And so here, finally, we get the payoff of 2 years worth of storylines as the two of them have a conversation together. It's absolutely beautiful work from Henry and Cusick and Sonia Wager. It's just, it's everything you would expect from these two people that love each other more than anything in the world, finally talking to each other when, they thought that the other one was going to be out of the picture completely. Obviously, now we have a little bit of catch up as well with, Desmond saying where he is in a manner of speaking. But,
I mean, I actually have the clip ready if you want to listen to it.
Do it. I'm ready to cry here on a Wednesday afternoon.
Here we go.
2004. Desmond is back on the phone.
No. Trust me.
I do trust you, but you still have to remember that number.
79460893. 79460893. It's a London number.
Excellent.
Are we really doing this?
The patch is done, but I don't know how long the battery will last. I hope she's there.
I hope so too.
The phone rings. The sound playing over the 1996 scene when Desmond leaves Penelope's home. She briefly looks down at him from a second-story window before closing the drapes. After several rings, someone answers. Hello?
Penny?
Desmond? The scene briefly changes to 1996 when Desmond is walking away from Penelope's.
Penny? Penny, you answered. You answered, Penny.
In London, Penelope is at home, standing by a Christmas tree. Des, where are you?
I'm on a boat. I've been on an island and oh my God, Penny, is it really you?
Yeah. Yes, it's me.
You believe me? You still care about me?
Des, I've been looking for you for the past 3 years. I know about the island. I've been researching. And then when I spoke to your friend Charlie, that's when I knew you were still alive. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy. Des, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's better.
I love ya, Penny. I've always loved ya. I'm so sorry. I love ya.
I love you too.
I don't know where I am, but
I'll find you, Des.
I promise
No matter what.
I'll come back to ya.
I won't give up. I
promise.
I
I'll
love
ya.
you. Static cuts them off. I'm sorry. The power source went dead. It's all we have. Desmond walks towards Saeed, his memory of him and his time on the island returning.
Thank you, Saeed.
They shake hands.
It was enough.
Are you all right now?
I'm perfect.
Daniel is on the beach flipping through his journal. On a page he sees, if anything goes wrong, Desmond Hume will be my constant.
There you go, Mike.
Wow, we're looking at
directly lifted from the Netflix streaming Lost season 4, episode 5.
I'm glad we took a glimpse into the universe where they hired non-union talent and broke the picket lines.
There was no strike that occurred when this was being recorded. Great fun had at the end of the post-show recaps era.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. So we should say that, Saeed, Desmond's going through a lot. He's jumping around. We know that that's one of the primary systems of this time displacement, the final symptom being death, as we saw with Minkowski. But he was able to call his constant in the nick of time. That seemingly, for the moment, anchors him back in the present. That's why he said it's enough. But where they are, Josh, is far from safe. We're finally introduced to this freighter, and we arrive in the midst of some real sketchy shit going on.
Some sketchy shit's going down on the freighter, specifically with the crew. We should say that the Constant is preceded by an episode we think is just fine in Eggtown, and it is followed up with a really tough act. The Other Woman, a Juliet flashback episode that effectively is about, like, do we trust Faraday and Charlotte? They're going to poison the whole island.
Yeah, we're introduced to, stop me if you heard this before, another Dharma station called the Orchid, which apparently contains a bunch of toxic gas.
This one's the Tempest. The Orchid
the Tempest.
We'll get to. Yes.
The Orchid we'll get to, yes. But the Tempest has a bunch of toxic gas that can basically be released as a failsafe of, like, if it ever comes down to the island needs to be completely wiped out, if it ever gets infiltrated, this is the opportunity to do so. And so Juliet is going to, using her own Dharma knowledge, tail these two mysterious strangers there to figure out what's going on with them.
Yeah, I think like the Lost has to stop a toxic gas station episode. It doesn't really chart high. In the flashbacks, we're finding out about Ben's obsession with Juliet and how he ostensibly like sends Goodwin to the tailies to die. He's like he's a huge incel, like very, very obsessive behavior towards Juliet. You're mine, he tells her. There's a funny thing about dinner rolls, he bakes bread, but all of that stuff is pretty weak. What is essential from this episode, at least the one thing that I would say you need to see, is this tape that Ben has in his house here at the barracks in New Otherton that he shows to Locke that reveals who is in charge of the freighter. And it is none other than the pissing man himself, Mike. Charles Widmore is the man responsible for the freighter and is trying to find the island and specifically trying to find Ben.
Yeah, so it is going to set up this really interesting dynamic that honestly we didn't know was a rivalry until this point, but not to say too much about future seasons, but it's very deeply entrenched, which is Talk about, going back to the urinal, the pissing race of Benjamin Linus versus Charles Winmore. He was the one that sponsored this entire voyage to the island to retrieve Ben. He was the one that supposedly sunk the fake Oceanic 815 to try to dissuade people from actually looking for the victims of the plane crash. So, yeah, just when we thought that this was kind of like an old soldering stick up of his ass rich guy who was the guy pretty in pink style getting in the way of Desmond and Penny's true love. No, he has a much bigger purpose when it comes to the main mythos of the island.
Yeah, so that's exciting. But it does seem like, we see like footage of people getting their butts kicked by Widmore goons. So it's like, okay, I'm starting to believe maybe that like okay, Faraday and Charlotte, they weren't just trying to toxic gas the island, but maybe some of the people on the Widmore camp are a little less than savory. So that becomes a thing starting with this episode. Also, Juliet and Jack kiss. There's a kiss.
Yeah, they're really trying to tease out this quadrangle for a little bit longer before Jack and Kate will leave the island. So we got the Kate and Sawyer side of things, and while that kind of falls apart, the Jack and Juliet side, which like had kind of cooled down a bit at the end of season 3, had a little bit of kindling in the beginning when the two were kind of working side by side to take down Ben. We got a spark here, Josh. We get a bit of a spark.
She says, Ben thinks I'm his. And then he kisses her and he says, let him try. I don't think that's what he says, but it's something like that. So that's the other woman. It's fine. Yeon. So this is a really interesting episode, and I think a divisive one. I've gone both ways where I've enjoyed it and I haven't. It's tricksy. It plays with you. But one of the things that it has going for it is we know that there's an Oceanic 6. We have Jack, Hurley, Kate, and Saeed claimed. There are 2 spots left, unless you count Aaron, and you just don't know yet because he was a baby. So here we go. Yeon, the episode that shows in the future Sun giving birth. And we know on the island, Sun is pregnant. And in the future, we see, or in the flashes anyway, we see that Jin is running around buying a gift to get to a hospital. He's going to be late for the delivery, except it is not for his wife's delivery. This is an event, an occasion in which he was working in the past for Mr. Paik, another job for his horrible father-in-law. And in the future, Sun is alone giving birth to Yeon, eventually visited in Korea by Hurley, and eventually the two of them visiting the grave of Jin Soo Kwan. And so now we have our Oceanic 6. Jin is not included. And in the future, it would appear that Jin is dead.
Yep, because he was on a freighter when it freaking blew up. This guy can only have so many lives. I mean, as a Kwan lover, this absolutely wrecked me the first time. Even when I see the twist coming, it still does. And it's odd because, like, the Jin stuff is some of the most comic confirmed flashback stuff we have ever had, even with the Hurley stuff. It's, hijinks of, oh, I got to get the big panda. Oh, no, I left the panda in the cab. Oh, I got to go get another one. Oh, how much do you need for it? But then we get this big revelation, and there's a really nice, bait and switch of, like, Sun yelling Jin's name while she's in labor, only for that to sort of be confirmed delirium. And then when it turns out that he drops off the panda for a client, and they're like, oh, I hope you have to cut to yours. It's like, hey, lay off me. I've only been married 2 months.
Yeah.
And then gets followed up with the absolute sucker punch of, like you mentioned, Sun standing there morosely and giving this incredible monologue from Yeonjin Kim about giving birth to their daughter to Jin's grave. And it just, I mean, again, it sets up things in multiple ways because now, A, the Oceanic 6 is confirmed, but B, it seems to be confirmed that we also have one of our first deaths of the season as well, of a major character. I mean, we certainly talked about this, that with Charlie dead, kind of all bets are off, as to, it doesn't matter how tenured or popular of a cast member you are on Lost. If it serves the plot, it serves the plot. And it seems like Jin is going to die while Sun is going to live alone. And while Jin will perhaps die together with some other people.
Maybe explode together. I don't know. As we get to that on the island, what happens? You got to remind me on the island. I don't know.
Let's stop down with the freighter for a second. Let's talk about our crew here. Let's talk about, probably besides the freighter crew, the other big guy to talk about from a new character perspective this season. Of course, Martin Keamy, played by Kevin Durant. He's not the Blob anymore, but he is certainly a supervillain here, as he is one of like the mercenaries hired, as we'll find out later, to have incredibly nefarious purposes for the island. And he is very, very aggressive. We're introduced to him first and foremost in The Constant, but as we're introduced to like him, the rather feckless Captain Galt, we have Omar, who is one of his main henchmen. Dr. Ray, I think, is his name. And we are introduced, or reintroduced, I should say, to... Now, this is something that had been advertised since before this season, that Harold Perrineau would be returning to the show in some way, shape, or form, but we weren't entirely sure how. We finally get confirmation after a few teasings, to your point earlier, Josh, as to who Ben's man on the boat is.
Yeah.
As Ray is going to now sort of like take Desmond and Saeed into this new place, basically saying like, you're staying here for the time being. Hey, Kevin, come in here and clean up this dingy dungeon that they're going to hang out in for the time being. And Michael slowly walks his way into frame as Saeed goes, nice to meet you, Kevin.
Yeah. And Desmond's like, no, really, seriously, nice to meet, because he has no idea who this dude is. So, he's really none the wiser. But I got really annoyed in the real time, and I still get annoyed that like everyone keeps doing, okay, well, who is your guy on the boat? Like, you don't know these people, you don't know who it is, and it's just very clearly going to be Michael, because Harold Perrineau was cast for the season. But I suspect binging the show and suddenly there's Michael again has a different feel than watching it in the real time. So maybe this works better for you. Either way, great to see Harold Perrineau back on the show. Unfortunately, things are not going great for Michael, as evidenced in the largely taking place in flashback episode Meet Kevin Johnson, where we're getting to see what happened to Michael after he and Walt escaped the island. I guess he couldn't hold on to the guilt of what he had done. He told Walt about it. Walt wants nothing to do with Michael. Michael wants nothing to do with Michael. But it seems like forces from the island, the ghost of Libby, the not ghost of Mr. Friendly, though he is a ghost now, show up and are compelling him back to the island. He tries to kill himself. He cannot. It seems like he does not have the ability to die right now. Talk about another superpower.
Yeah, so as Tom is going to tell him, he has work to do. And the question is this all coincidence, or are we mistaking that for fate? Is it possible that the island has some sort of hold on Michael still, despite the fact that he escaped from it with blood on his hands at the end of season 2? Regardless, Michael is stuck almost in this odd purgatorial situation, despite the fact that he's left the island, where he wants to move on. He wants to die, but he just can't. And so Mr. Friendly is going to present him with this opportunity of, you can move on once you do this thing. And he is going to present him with this false ID known as Kevin Johnson, saying, there's a freighter leaving from Fiji, much like Survivor contestants will be in just a little while, Josh. You hop on the freighter, basically go undercover as a mole and await further instructions from Ben.
Yeah, so that's what we get from Michael. He hopes for redemption. He hopes that somehow this is going to be the thing that, cleanses his soul of the crimes that he committed. But so far, it just looks like it's yielding him beatdowns at the hands of Saeed. And
it's also very funny that all this mystique around who is the man on the boat? Oh, Michael is Meet Kevin Johnson. I believe the episode almost immediately opens with Saeed beating the shit out of him, immediately bringing him into the captain's office and saying, like, this man's an imposter. His name is Michael Dawson.
His name's not Kevin Johnson. And then back at the barracks, everyone now finds out that Michael is the guy on the boat. And additionally, that Charles Widmore and his goons are coming looking for Ben, and they're loaded and ready to go. And so, maybe not the safest place to be, at least according to Ben, who has Rousseau, has Danielle, leave with Alex and Carl. Alex being Ben's quote unquote daughter, who he, seemingly has, he kidnapped, right? Way back
Yep.
in the day. And Rousseau has just been reunited with, and her entire character arc was about reconciliation with Alex. And they've been having an enjoyable time getting to know each other again here in season 4 up to this point. But they leave. Ben gives them like a map of like, go find my people. You'll be safer there. And as they leave, Rousseau is killed. Carl is killed. Alex is taken hostage by Kimi and his goons. And shortly thereafter, one writer's strike later, Mike, Alex is killed, and the shape of things to come comes
Yeah.
into focus.
A rather, I certainly have said unceremonious death for Danielle Rousseau, who was presented as one of the most mysterious yet tragic characters from the beginning when we first see her in Solitary. Maybe part of it is because the writers were almost like, what do we do with Claire after she's given birth? Okay, now that Rousseau has been reunited with her daughter, what do we do with her now? But I always felt a certain way that she ends up getting just kind of killed off at the end of an episode alongside Carl, of all people. And so suffice it to say, Alex will, yes, be reserved for the much bigger death in this episode, and something that will definitively change Ben for the rest of the season.
Yes. So the shape of things to come, explaining, not explaining how Ben got off the island, though. Again, like if you cut out the flash forwards and restitch them together, this is the very next thing you see from Ben on the other side of Ben's very last appearance on island in the finale. So he turns that frozen donkey wheel and he winds up over here in the middle of the Tunisian desert, where we saw a polar bear collar once upon a few episodes ago. This episode clears the decks. We've got Kimi, awful Kimi, and his team just sniping Oceanic red shirt after red shirt after red shirt. Claire is like knocked unconscious. It's really just down to our main crew. And Ben, who is such a slippery little guy, thinks he's just going to be able to roll a persuasion check his way out of here. And he gets a nat 1 and gets his daughter killed.
Yeah, so basically what happened is we find out a little bit in this episode, and obviously through the next couple, what Kimi's MO was, which was basically his job is, okay, grab Benjamin Linus and basically wipe out the rest of the island along the way. Leave no survivors. And so his team has charged in and started to do just that. Obviously, it started with Kimi and with Carl and with Rousseau. And so Kimi is going to come waltzing in with Alex. And as Ben is holed up inside of his house, makes this demand of like, come out, let us take you, or we will kill your daughter. And Alex is begging for her life. Please, Dad, just do it. And Ben is trying to play it cool, right? He's trying to play 3D chess of like, surely you won't do this. And so he's gloating like, I don't think you'll do it. She's not even my daughter.
But Kimi says, don't call me Shirley.
Yes, exactly. And he is quite literally blown away when Alex is. It is far and away the most shocked we have ever seen this character since we met him as Henry Gale. Even during moments where his identity was discovered, when he was captured by Jack, he has always maintained this pretty steeled visage. That shatters here. He was wrong, though Ben will accredit it to the fact that supposedly Charles Winmore, quote, changed the rules. And so that is going to really light a fire under Ben in a very different way. He is going to go into this, he's going to go into the secret room and apparently unleash the smoke monster, which makes its first appearance in the season just to wipe out a bunch of these mercs.
It seems like he has the ability to summon the monster via a toilet hole in his basement.
Yes.
Just he signal the flush and the smoke monster comes out.
Are we sure that's not just like a sewer
That's
discharge?
The toxic gas.
Yeah,
That's toxic gas.
He emptied the septic out, maybe a little bit of a backfill there.
Yeah.
So now we're sort of left in the aftermath of it all. Kimi's group has been put to bay, at least. The barracks have just been wiped out.
Destroyed.
Some houses have been blown up. And so Locke and Ben are now saying, we have to go to Jacob. That's the next
Right.
best thing that we need to go to now that the island is, and all of us are in mortal danger. And Hurley is going to go with them as well, which will again set up the finale.
Almost against his will. Almost against his will. He doesn't really want to go. Locke is like, I'm taking Hurley. And Sawyer, of all people, is like, you hurt as much of a single hair on his head, I'll kill you. And Hurley is eventually like, I'm going to go. I'm just going to go. I don't want anyone to die over this. So it's Sawyer and Miles and Claire and Aaron in one direction. It is Hurley, Locke, and Ben in the other. And again, to be stressed, this is the first episode back after the writer's strike, first episode produced after the resolution of the writer's strike. And what an explosive way to get back into Lost. It sets up the end game for season 4. And then there's something nice back home in which Jack gets his appendix removed.
So, Leah, let's talk about what's happening with Team Jack, because there's this odd wrinkle in the previous episode where Team Jack has made their way back to like the A15 camp. They're just kind of waiting for rescue to come with Faraday and with Charlotte. And then a body washes up on the beach. And it's a body that is recently familiar to us, the body of Dr. Ray.
Yes.
And we're wondering, like, what the hell
Wait a
happened
minute.
there?
We didn't see that. Like, that guy didn't die. Did we see that guy die?
And so they actually radio back to the freighter asking where the doctor is. And they get an even more mysterious message. The doctor is fine. And he won't be fine for much longer. You know, he has a little bit of a ticking time bomb on him. But it does confirm this thing that Faraday has referred to loosely in season 4, which is that even outside of Desmond, there is some time displacement between the island and what's going on within this outside radius of where the freighter is. That apparently the island set its watch a few minutes ahead.
Yeah, so it's just like a cool little bit of like how the time, warp sort of works here. Let's do the time warp again.
Just a jump to the left.
Just a jump to the left. In the future, Jack and Kate, they're back together. In fact, they're together. I mean, like they'd never really like quite got, like they'd kissed that one time, but now they're like together. And they're gonna get married on top of it, except Jack's having some troubles. Some troubles are beginning to manifest for Jack, where he sees his father, right? Like he sees like the ghost of his father in the lobby. He's doing this, he's doing that. He's starting to really feel like this is where he visits Hurley as well. And he's like very unsettled by what Hurley is telling him, that the ghosts are telling Hurley, and that they should have never left. Jack is starting to wonder, who is Kate seeing? Kate is off. Is she cheating? He's seemingly like relapsing to like his Sarah stuff. Eventually, Jack and Kate break up, and Jack is really left in this sort of like despaired place where he feels like maybe we are supposed to go back. Maybe we're not supposed to be here. He's going to need a little bit of extra pushing to get to that place, but that's what we know so far.
We also know that Sawyer is certainly still in the picture, even if he doesn't seem to be off island, where when Jack finally confronts Kate when he's waiting up for her late at night, right, saying, "Where were you?" She says that she was told something by Sawyer that she needed to take care of off island, that she wasn't able to tell him directly. And that obviously is going to drudge up a lot of complicated emotions for Jack, as once again, Kate will sort of be told a rather scathing final message to end a confrontation when Jack says, like, "Aaron isn't even yours," just when he comes in. So, suffice it to say, we were wondering how these two got to the level that they did at the end of Through the Looking Glass, when she obviously is very cold towards him. Now we see why, and Jack is nearly running cold, as on the island, the past couple episodes, he's been a little worse for wear. Maybe it's the stress as to everything that's happening. Daniel Faraday finally confirms to Jack of like, yeah, we weren't exactly the heroes that you thought we were. We are not exactly operating under those orders. And it's coming at just about the worst time. As it turns out, Jack has appendicitis, and it is down initially to Juliet to do it, considering that she is the only other medical professional in the area. But in true Jack fashion, he is going to try to
Let me
walk
do it. I'm going to
Yeah.
do my own appendicitis. I'm going to do my own appendectomy.
Yeah, like, okay, just numb the area, don't sedate me, and hold up an ornate series of mirrors like Desmond in The Hatch that I can talk you through how to do my appendectomy.
Yeah. He's there. Kate's there. Bernard is pitching in as well. It comes out like Jack's true feelings for Kate and Juliet is like she kind of shades Jack. She's like, I know you're awake right now. And so like there's some trouble in paradise between Jack and Juliet, who have just kissed a few episodes ago. I'd be mad if I was Juliet as well, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. We should also note that on the other side of things, first off, maybe a bit of a confirmation or a green flag from Miles' set of powers that they're walking over the site of the ending of Meet Kevin Johnson, and he just randomly asks, like, who's Danielle and Carl, seemingly being able to detect their spirits. But the bigger thing to get is that, they stumble upon Frank Lapidus, who is saying that, Kimi is basically on the lookout for them after they evaded his grasp last time. And then Claire is going to wake up in the middle of the night and, much like her half-brother, Jack Shepherd, see Christian sitting
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
And she says an often mean line here on Down the Hatch, Dad? And everyone else will wake up the next morning and Claire is gone.
Claire is gone. Where's Claire? Well, we have to turn to the penultimate episode of season 4 for that answer. Cabin Fever. Cabin Fever, Mike Bloom. A John Locke flashback episode.
Many times over, this is basically John Locke, This Is Your Life.
Yes, not a moment too soon, as this is, as Mike says, like a crawl through John's life from birth through the immediate aftermath of being in the wheelchair.
Yeah, through Matthew Abaddon being like, you should go to Australia to think you're going on a walkabout, only to get angrily denied.
It's a very interesting thing where we see that that Locke's life has been tracked. That Locke has constantly been saying, like, I have a destiny, I have a purpose. There seems to be some great significance between Locke and the others, for instance. And it doesn't seem to be completely empty, as we see Richard Alpert, again, who seemingly just does not age. We see Richard Alpert visit him as a baby. We see Richard Alpert visit him as a toddler, and John seems to fail some kind of test that Richard gives to Locke. We see
he picked the knife instead of the compass.
We see Locke, when he's a high school student, is being offered a spot at is it Middelos Science, which is the same name that Richard Alpert gives to Juliet back in season 3 when he lures her to the island. So throughout this episode, there are all sorts of different attempts to bring Locke to the island, and I think like it plays in like it's sort of like it don't mistake coincidence for fate, as the late Mr. Echo would say. And is it fate, or is it some like very carefully thought out design? Is this not something that's divine because a man like Alpert is seemingly trying to recruit Locke? But why do they want him, and why is it ultimately Matthew Abaddon, this incredibly enigmatic Lance Reddick character, that is going to tell Locke, like, go to the island? Or he's like, go like get yourself healed, you're gonna go with places, and one day you're gonna owe me. And so he's paving the way for, like, you'll get to the island someday, and your going to the island is somehow going to require a form of payback. You're gonna have to pay me back. So what all of that means is certainly especially up in the air given the ending of season 4. But here in this episode on the island, it's Locke's quest to find Jacob's cabin. And the reason they bring Hurley is because Hurley earlier in the season sees it himself. And so he's like,
in the premiere, I believe, he's just like tailing behind Sawyer, and he trips and he happens to stumble upon the cabin. He makes a spare mention of it, which obviously flags in the mind of Locke and especially Ben, who has been told otherwise, like only special people are able to see the cabin.
Correct. So they need Hurley for it. Hurley and Ben are going to share an Apollo bar in a really great scene outside of the cabin while Locke goes in. And Locke this time doesn't see just like pure shenanigans. What he sees is Christian Shepherd. Once
Yeah.
again, another person seeing Christian. And Claire is there as well.
Yeah, so this is something that I mentioned a little bit in The Man Behind the Curtain, that certainly Losties back in the day did a freeze frame of like a cut across the chair, and there was this older white man sitting in the chair in Jacob's cabin, and people thought, wait, that kind of looks like John Terry. Is that
Yeah.
Christian Shepherd? And now we sort of get either whether it's the tail wagging the dog or it was always the plan. We have indeed the man himself. We saw him, to your point earlier, be able to get Claire away from the survivors and get into this cabin. And here he is passing along a message to Locke, and he'll be given it to it. It'll be given to him off screen, but Locke will walk out of the cabin. And when asked what Jacob told him through Christian Shepherd, Locke replies, he wants us to move the island.
He wants us to move the island. And this was a very fun thing to experience in the real time. I think one of the theories that was developing is like the island's always moving, man.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, wait, the island can move? And like hearing that on the show is like, okay, this is really, really cool.
Yeah.
So the stage is set, Mike, for a rather climactic finale. The 3-part There's No Place Like Home, which has a lot to accomplish. It has to explain how the Oceanic Six are going to get off the island. It has to tell you what happened next. It has to tell you about like the press conference that they hold and the lies that they start to tell, because their story throughout the season is not consistent, and you know that they're holding things back. So we have to see those things get formulated. We have to see them lie about, oh, 2 other guys survived, Charlie and Boone, but they died. We have to see Saeed's wife to be Nadia.
Mm-hmm.
Saeed and Nadia have to reunite, only for Nadia to seemingly not be in the picture for too terribly long. We have a whole lot that we have to accomplish. We have to see Jack eulogize his father. He needed to bury his father. He can't bury his father's actual body, but he can hold the service. And this is going to bring Claire's mother into the mix, and is going to put onto Jack's radar that not only is Claire your sister, but Aaron is your nephew. We have to go through Hurley starting to lose his mind again. We have to get
at least Cheech did follow his word, and he did stay. He's at the surprise party, and he's there warmly greeting him.
We have to go back. So of all the things that the show has to do off island, there's just so much that they have to accomplish. And then there's so much on the island that they have to do to get us there. So Mike, good luck. Give it a shot.
All right. Well, where do we want to start? You sort of outline, I think, a lot of the off-island stuff.
We'll circle back to it. That is effectively the gist of the off-island stuff.
All right. So let's talk about on-island, because we didn't really mention this, but oftentimes these penultimate episodes like to set the stage, right? And let's talk about the fact that while Kimi lost the battle, he does not intend to lose the war. And so after getting defeated by the monster, he's going to make his way back to the Kahana, to the freighter. That's when he's going to end up killing Dr. Ray, sort of filling in that circle, that self-fulfilling prophecy, by being like, hey, we just got this radio message that the doctor was dead. Well, you're dead now. Let's dump your body in. But Kimi has this big plan. He's going to charge in now with another group with this quote-unquote secondary protocol, which is, again, to wipe out everything. But he has a bit of a fail-safe here. Not in the form of an electromagnetic key or toxic gas, but he basically has this heart rate monitor strapped to him that is hooked up to many, many pounds of C4 in the engine room of the Kahana. And so basically, he's kind of using himself as a turnkey here, saying, if I die at all...
Your friends on the boat will die too.
Yeah, because everyone else is traveling to the Kahana. Faraday is shepherding people back and forth under the auspice of like, oh,
We're
yeah, we'll
out
try
of here.
Yeah, because they're going to come in and kill everybody on the island. So let's get as many people off the island as possible.
Let's get to that boat where it's presumably super safe, but instead it is filled with explosives, and
Yeah, and
Kimi's
also
threat might work with some people, but
And also, Michael did temporarily sabotage the engines as well to
right.
make sure they stay grounded and don't, envelop the island any further. So we're going to now be seeing all these different moving pieces. Quite literally, the writers, when writing There's No Place Like Home, had a big map of the island and like little icons of the Oceanic Six, and basically had to figure out, how do we get this specific configuration of people in the right time, in the right place? And then how do all the other characters that are around them, like a Sawyer, like a Jin, not be able to make their way onto the chopper that is going to take them all away from the island?
Right. So it happens in various waves. There's Faraday shuttling people to the freighter. Jin and Sun get there that way.
Aaron does as well.
Aaron does as well. Saeed is no longer on the freighter. He comes back and he gets into some fisticuffs with Kimi at one point. You think maybe he got Kimi, but nope, not quite. Sawyer and Jack are gonna have to team up to go and find Hurley. It's going to lead Jack to this other Dharma station, the Orchid Station, which is where apparently Locke is going to be able to move the island. And we're going to have this very fateful conversation. A long time in the making. It's been a really long time since Jack and Locke have had real time together. Like they faced off twice briefly in season 3. They faced off once memorably at the start of this season. But these were people who were philosophical adversaries for the first couple of seasons. And now they're getting to have one more really strong man of science versus man of faith debate, where Locke is trying to tell Jack, you guys aren't supposed to leave. We're here for a reason. There's a reason that we're here. And Jack's like, I'm done letting you keep me on this island. I nearly blew your head off earlier for this. You're really going to try it with me? And Locke is going to say, well, if you do leave, you're going to have to lie about it. You're going to have to lie. You're going to have to protect us. You're going to have to, no one's going to believe you. So you're going to have to lie, and good luck living with it. And that is what Locke leaves Jack with. And you can imagine those words maybe living rent-free in a future Jack's mind.
So on the island, Saeed and Kate are able to engage with Richard Alpert and, again, the remnants of the others who have just kind of like, ever since season 3, they lost their leader. They kind of just ferried themselves off to a remote corner of the jungle. But they do recruit them to get the jump on the mercenary. This is where I think Richard Alpert's going to like shoot Kimi a bunch of times in the back. Yet it's another Mikhail, Josh. His character lives once again as like Kimi is somehow able to survive that, as we're going to get, and in closing in on the station, as you mentioned, yet another one called the Orchid. And the Orchid features this rather interesting centerpiece. At the bottom of this deep climb down is a wild metallic wheel sticking out with like a light behind it into parts unknown. And so that is sort of the MacGuffin. That is where they are looking to go.
The seasons, again, Lindelof and Cuse talked about code names for the endings of the seasons, right? There's the snake in the mailbox. There was the bagel. Something was the challah, I believe, as well. This was called the frozen donkey wheel, was what they said in like episodes in advance, was the name of sort of their like big twist for season 4. And so it was a very funny moment when the episode aired, and it's like, well, I get the frozen donkey wheel. It's literally that.
Yeah, because like there is quite literally a hookup that is under the assumption that, okay, there were animals, perhaps polar bears, that were brought down there to turn this wheel and seemingly move the island. So Locke and Ben are there because that's, again, where they should go to accomplish the task that Christian/Jacob has seemingly given them. But also there is Kimi. Somehow Kimi has survived, but it won't be for long as Ben, finally face to face with the man who killed his adopted daughter, sees red. A man of like pristine logic and Machiavellian calculated moves, just lets that all go in the face of pure emotion. He murders Kimi right there, right then, which then sets off again the C4, which we should mention on the freighter. Jin and Michael are reunited under wild circumstances. Desmond is there as well. They are trying to prevent the bomb exploding as much as possible. They're trying to spray it down with fire extinguishers and everything. Meanwhile, Frank Lapidus has been discovered. He was subdued by the Mercs, but again, that was all displaced due to the others showing up. And so Frank is going to fly a bunch of people to the freighter now, which will include Jack, which will include Hurley, which will include Kate, which will include Sawyer, which will include Saeed. They are able to all make their way back to the freighter, but not for
Not entirely.
long.
Not entirely. On their way back to the freighter, they are losing gas because they got their engine got their gas tank got shot, not shocked. And they are losing power quickly. They are over capacity with weight. Lapidus suggests like we gotta take off everything that moves. And there's a moment where it looks like eyes are on Hurley, and I really hate that. But it's ultimately Sawyer who looks at Kate and whispers something to her. And she says, "Why are you asking me to do this?" And he gives her a big old smooch and says, "Just do it,
Just
Freckles."
do it, Freckles.
And hops off the chopper. So Sawyer, not one of the Oceanic Six. Maybe there was some question about is he somehow off the island? He's in the water. And Jack like tries to reassure Kate, like he's a good swimmer. He'll swim back. He'll be fine. And of course, we're gonna see that Sawyer makes it back to the island alongside Juliet just in time to turn around and see the smoking crater in the middle of the ocean. And that occurs in dramatic fashion, Mike.
Right. So the chopper is able to touch down on the freighter and be able to patch up the leak and get everything refueled. But then when they get informed, like, oh no, shit's about to go down, there's only so much time we can prevent the inevitable, this thing's gonna blow. Then we have Sun now joining the group with Aaron in her arms, and they get onto the freighter, and Jin is nearly there. Desmond tells him to go. He's running for it. Desmond's able to make it on. Jin is trying to make his way up. But as the chopper is pulling up, we see this horrific explosion as Sun similarly screams in horror her husband's name as everything seemingly goes up in smoke. The Kahana is now officially blown apart. Christian appears, right? And tells
Yes.
Michael, you can go now.
You can go now is what he tells Michael. Michael's like, who are you? He says, you can go now.
Which now officially signals the end of his character. He got what he wanted in the end. But yeah, as you mentioned, Sawyer swims back, arrives on the beach, and we see Juliet just like housing a bottle of liquor as she points out onto the horizon, and they see this plume of smoke. Back in the season 1 finale, that represent foreboding danger, and here it more so represents sunken dreams, as at least in this moment, they are all going to assume that the freighter exploded with all their friends on it.
And on top of that, they turn around with the helicopter like, we got to go back to the island. We have to land. But there's no island to go back to after a minute, because after Ben has killed Kimi and condemned everyone on the freighter to die, he parts ways with Locke. He says, sorry, I was so bad to you. And it's my turn to do something now. And he knows that in doing this, he can't come back. So he goes down, he spins the frozen donkey wheel. He's going to wind up in Tunisia. The island is going to wind up, who the hell knows? It just blinks out of existence in front of everybody on the helicopter. It's gone. This is, I think, for a character like Saeed, who is very clear about, like, I believe what I can see. A character like Jack, who is also rather meat and potatoes. This is a wild thing to witness, that the island is just boop, gone in less than 60 seconds by quite a bit.
Yes. And so now it turns into a story of what happens. Because now, almost immediately, the chopper is going down. And so they end up deploying a life raft. So we are left with our Oceanic Six, which again are Jack, Kate, Hurley, Saeed, Aaron, and Sun, alongside Frank Lapidus and Desmond as well.
Desmond's here as well. Yeah.
They find Desmond unconscious in the water. They're able to save him. And so, again, now we're saying we have our Oceanic 6. How the hell do they make their way back to the mainland? And listen, the season 3 finale showed that in that case, it was not Penny's boat. But in this case, it very much is.
They find Penny. Penny finds them. Penny has embarked. She told him in the constant, I know about the island. You get the sense that like she hung up the phone and flew out here as quickly as possible. And somehow on her boat was able to get close enough. And she is there to rescue the entire Oceanic 6. It's like, okay, one good thing. Like Michael and Jin and the whole freighter has exploded. That's all quite bad. We need one victory here. Give us something. And so the victory is Desmond and Penny reunite. There is some victory in the fact that at least like 6 of these people are escaping the island, but it doesn't seem to be like the happiest thing, as we see with all of these flash forwards. Everyone is damaged to different degrees and have like different degrees of regret. And Jack, who is a guy who's all about fixing things, as we know from his pattern and his history, he got these guys off the island, but everybody else is gone. And as far as he knows, they're either still there or they're dead, but they were left behind by him. And that is really landing poorly with Jack. On top of that, someone named Jeremy Bentham is dead.
Yeah, so we find out that in Through the Looking Glass, Jack had read something in the newspaper that seemingly, I mean, granted, he was pretty over the edge, quite literally, before that car accident happened in Through the Looking Glass. But like that was something that really triggered him reaching out to Kate. And in the beginning of specifically the way that Through the Looking Glass aired was sort of like what they did with Exodus, where they aired part 1 as a separate episode and then parts 2 and 3 together as a 2-hour finale. And so part 1 is really focused around, to your point, the touchdown of the Oceanic 6, them reuniting with their families, etc., etc. This one quite literally picks up from the end of We Have to Go Back, complete with, after Jack yelling it, screech, Kate stops the car, marches up to Jack being like, do you believe how demented you are for saying that? And Jack is going to reveal,
I'm sorry,
that he has the obituary of a man by the name of Jeremy Bentham. And Kate is going to rebuff him in that moment and say, do never say that name again. And as we mentioned, through parts 2 and 3, we're going to check in a little bit as to what's going on with the other members of the Oceanic 6. Saeed is going to infiltrate Santa Rosa to try to take Hurley away.
Yeah, he's breaking Hurley out. Bentham is dead, is what he tells Hurley.
And this is where Hurley has that moment we mentioned before of like, hold on, checkmate, Mr. Echo.
Yeah.
Speaking of checkmate, Sun is going to prove that hell hath no fury like a widowed son, as she is going to approach Charles Widmore and say that she is now a majority, she's like the managing director now of Paik Industries, and that she is going to get her revenge on him for killing her husband in some way, shape, or form. Though Kate has, again, denied Jack's advances here and going back to the island, it seems that she is haunted by some sort of manifestation of Claire, who tells her, like, don't take Aaron back to the island. It all culminates in a return to the Hofstrahler funeral parlor, which, again, Jack had visited. He was the only one in that funeral in the season 3 finale. This time, it's a party of 2, not 5.
It is a party of 3, even, really.
And technically speaking.
And actually, I believe it's a party of 5 because they ended up filming versions of this scene with 2 additional corpses in the coffin to throw off all of the people who were hunting for spoilers. So there's versions of this scene in which Sawyer is in the coffin. There's a version of this scene in which Desmond is in the coffin. But in the actual version of Lost that we see, having spent the whole off season between season 3 and 4 wondering, like, among other things, like, who died? Because we know that somebody died. And like, it's now that we know it's a flash forward, it's got to be someone we know. But I don't think many people anticipated that it would be like the guy who is Jack's equal in many ways, like his opposite number. It's Locke. Locke is dead at some point in the future. That's his body. And Ben tells Jack, we're going to have to go back. We're going to have to convince everybody who left to go back.
All of you.
And we're going to even have to take the corpse. and pan up, and there you go, John Locke dead in a coffin, and he's got to come back with the rest of them. And so you're left going into season 5 of, okay, we're caught up. How are they, like, we know, like, we have to go back, but how do we get back for all the people who are of the Oceanic Six and the surrounding characters there? And then also, like, where the hell did the rest of them go? What the hell happened to the people still on the island? What do they even have to go back to?
Well, also the fact that John Locke, Mr. I will never leave the island under any circumstances, did at some
Not only
point.
is he dead, he somehow is off the island on top of it.
Which is also interesting because the last thing we see of him in a live form is with Ben gone, he fully embraces his new role as the leader of the others. Before this bright light envelops everybody and the island disappears, we see him walk into the others' camp. So again, considering where Locke is, it is wild to think about how he ended up not only off the island, but dead. So that is definitely one of the largest questions we need to speak about. And now, Josh, we've gotten some flashbacks, we've gotten some flash forwards. It's safe to say now, season 5, we're going to delve more into the idea of like simultaneous timelines of what's going on the island, whenever that is, wherever that is, and what's happening off the island. But again, not to say too much, but saying it's simultaneous timelines is a very operative term.
If somehow you have gotten this far in Lost and you don't know much about Lost and you don't know sort of like where we're going next, keep it that way for one more week when we come back to talk about Lost season 5 for first time viewers. It is going to be a time. We're going to have a very, very good time talking about season 5, which is one of my favorite seasons of the show. And a lot of work that has to be, implemented here in season 4, I think, to get us to season 5 and what we get involved in season 5. And some major questions get answered. Some new questions get raised. Some characters who you've heard about, you'll meet. And some chance encounters that are going to be particularly batshit nuts. So we will be back in a week's time to talk about season 5. Mike, is there anything else from Lost season 4 that you want to get into?
I don't think so. I mean, there was a lot to cram in there, despite the fact that it's the shortest season by far at only 13 episodes, technically 11 if you count all 3 parts of There's No Place Like Home as one. There was still a lot. And I feel like for the most part, they were able to pull it off. I think, obviously, if the writers were told from the beginning it's a 13-episode season,
it's paced differently, probably.
Yeah, you definitely, Charlie, paced things differently, especially in terms of your episodes like The Economist, like Eggtown, even something like Something Nice Back Home still kind of shows scotches of like, yeah, I mean, hell, they spend time basically at the 815 camp there, sort of a flashback, if you will, to those salad days of just hanging out on the beach. But this is one of the most action-packed seasons of the show so far, considering that we have quite literally a bunch of firefight engage and monster fight in a way in the form of what Kimi brings. I also loved Kimi. It's tough to really describe him through this kind of summarial responses, but Kevin Durant is a very fun mustache,
very good character.
Villain.
Yes. Again, like, finish the show. This is Lost Spark Notes from Mike and I. If you want real detail, finish the whole show and then go all the way back to the very beginning of this feed so you can experience Down the Hatch in its spoiler-filled entirety. We comb over this show as thoroughly as humanly possible. So if this is wetting your whistle for that, you've got a treasure trove of Lost content to go back and listen to for our thoughts on Kimi, about Meet Kevin Johnson with an A instead of 2 E's, all sorts of other Shrekmund. You got a little taste of Shrekmund today. So many other
very
things.
Bad taste, just one that sticks in your mouth that you want to wash out.
No, it's so good. It's so good. So make sure you come back for next week's podcast when we talk about season 5 of Lost at the very least, and then go all the way back to the beginning of Down the Hatch when you're finished with Lost. You could do that by subscribing. robhasawebsite.com/downthehatch. That's robhasawebsite.com/downthehatch. Send us emails, downthehatch, RHAP @gmail.com. BattlestarGalactica.com. And don't forget, Battlestar Galactica is coming up very soon. You want to go and watch seasons 1 and season 2 of Battlestar Galactica. It all begins with a mini series as well. Seek it out, currently on Hulu, as I'm saying these words, in the United States. And we will be back on the other side of our lost content, resuming our conversations about Battlestar Galactica with a little bit of like a palate cleanser and a table setter to get everybody back on the same page. But we are almost back to our BSG coverage. Follow Mike Bloom. A million things going on at a Mike Bloom type. Mike, anything you want to do?
A lot of things I want to do, including cover all these great shows that are coming about from a reality TV perspective. I mean, Josh, this is the last time we are talking before the premiere of Survivor 47.
Yeah.
Much like a freighter left Fiji, a new boatload of castaways are arriving on those beaches. So if you're a fan of that, I got plenty of preseason coverage for you to check out if you need a little bit of a cram session on who these new contestants are. Obviously, a lot of coverage coming our way once the season airs. Big Brother, The Challenge, TV for Real, of course, on the scripted side of things. Sasha Joseph and I took a little bit of a week off, but we are back on as well, talking with another reality star about their taste in scripted television. But you can follow everything I'm doing at a Mike Bloom type.
That's him. I'm at Round Howard. We'll be back next week with season 5 of Lost. We have to go back, but for now, we just have to go. All right. See you next week. Bye.